It was noontime today in the center of Beijing when a man walked to the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace.
Well, all right. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Well, today we're going to talk about a badass, and it's a badass woman. Not a lot of people tell stories and celebrate the history of women in the past, and it's nice when we get the opportunity. So I like it. Zheng Yi Sao. I'm going to try and get it right. I think that's right the first time. I don't speak Cantonese. Kevin, you don't speak Cantonese?
I don't.
Okay.
And you're going to have to forgive us for butchering. There's going to be a lot of names and a lot of places that we're going to mispronounce.
Yeah. But all right, just add a Cantonese dialect if you understand or know, the right answer. Just forgive us and just fill it in your head. But all right, so Ching Shih is known as the Pirate Queen, and when you hear about how impressive she was, you're gonna understand why people look at her that way. So the big thing is, I think the reason we don't like to necessarily celebrate brutality and coldness or whatever, but you'll notice all her steps seem to be very business minded, very calculated, and not just for the sake of brutality. And I think that brutality ends up being a necessary evil as a woman trying to navigate kind of through an ugly man's world, right? We'll say that. So, because turns out like women were slow to get rights in the United States, turns out even less so in China. And she didn't come from like an upper class family. She, came from the pits. So tell us about it. Who is Ching Shih So, Kevin?
Well, we don't really know what her name is. Zheng Yi Sao is basically the wife of Zheng Yi. That's what that translates as. And in the early 1800s in China, in the South China Sea, which is basically it goes from Malaysia in the west to Taiwan in the east and south to the Sumatra. There's like a lot of islands, a lot of different ports in that area, and China itself was divided up into a lot of smaller principalities that were kind of independent. And there was an emperor, but it wasn't like full control. At the time it was like very broken up, and there was a lot of regulations on trade from different countries. So basically every seafaring merchant was also a smuggler, which
Right.
it's a short step from smuggler to pirate.
Right.
So it was kind of a complicated area. The Chinese did not have huge naval fleets. They were primarily inland. If you look at China, you can see that most of, they have a large coast, but most of the country is not near the coast. There's a lot of rivers and a lot of small streams and things like that throughout the country. But for the most part, it's a pretty landlocked life there. So they had a very small naval fleet.
Gotcha. Well, that's it. So there was Zheng Yi, who had a pirate fleet, right? And they were
he
called
was probably
Red
the
Flag
most
Fleet. Yeah.
Yeah, he was probably the most powerful pirate in the area. And he came from a family of pirates. Like they had been doing pirate shit, for 100 years since the Ming Dynasty, which was, I think 1655. Is when it ended. They were like, father to son pirates, like all the way through.
Right. And that's the thing. So he had his pirate fleet that was the size of most countries as far as naval ships. So that's pretty significant. I mean, he wasn't, nobody. This is a long established, guy who kind of controlled the seas. And I got to say, a long way through, the government, I don't want to say liked him, appreciated him, but in a way they did. He was part of the protection for China. And that's the thing.
Right.
Like it was kind of a mutual understanding, we'll say. I don't think they were happy about pirates out there, doing things, but it also
No, but
protected
he
China.
was, right. And for a long time, he worked as a privateer for China in Vietnam.
Right.
Just taking ships and we always use this word privateer because a lot of early Americans were privateers, but I mean that's just a pirate. You're
It's,
just a pirate when
you
you're a
get the
privateer.
idea. Right.
Yeah.
So
Somebody says it's okay, but that doesn't mean you're not a pirate.
so in 1801, that's when Ching Shih comes into the picture.
Mhm.
She's 26. She's working on they call it a flower boat,
Right.
basically a floating brothel. There's a Cantonese word for it, but I don't know. That's where we're not going there. And basically, uh, Zheng Shi's red flag fleet raids the harbor, and instead of taking ransom, which is kind of his go-to, uh, and he's like about 40 years old, he sees, well, the woman he chooses to be his wife, and he appreciates her beauty and her sharp mind. And I gotta say, and so she's working in this brothel, and but it doesn't go like the way you would expect. You think a pirate rolls in and says, "That's a pretty girl, she's mine." She's like, "Whoa, if you want what you're really looking for, we're gonna have to have a negotiation." And I gotta say, this is where she shines, is negotiations over and over again. Not just
Mhm.
this one negotiation, but she shines in negotiation. And she says, "I'll be your wife. I'll go with you. I'll be willing. We'll have the relationship that you're looking for, but we're going to be partners. That means I have 50% of the control of your entire fleet. I have 50% of the say in our discussions and I'm an equal partner. And that's the only way we're going to make this happen." And I have a feeling he recognized that she might be a little smarter than he was. That's my own
Mhm.
personal suspicion.
Yeah.
And he said,
I mean, a
"What?"
few of us are in marriages like that.
Right. You know how it is. It's possible that the woman could actually know more than the man. I've heard of
Mhm.
that happening. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, putting that out there. So they get together and they basically take his empire, which is already very impressive, and they make it even more impressive. So what happens next, Kevin?
Well, Jing Yi dies.
Oh,
So her husband, she's been married for a couple of years.
well, we
Um,
did skip a step. They adopt a son, or he adopts a son
right.
that they find at some.
Yeah, he captures a ship and takes one of the young guys on the ship and adopts him as his son. His name was Jing Pao,
All right.
and so then Jing Yi dies. There's a lot of this we don't really know a lot of this history. There's very little like written firsthand knowledge about a lot of this stuff.
Right.
But he falls off a mast during a
Or he
storm,
falls
or he falls
overboard.
overboard.
Maybe he
Yeah,
tripped and fell on her dagger. Like, we don't
yeah.
know.
We don't
But
really know why he died.
the accepted consensus is there was a big storm and he fell unexpectedly, hopefully unaided, and we just assume good things. Because
Right.
otherwise we all start worrying about our wives that might be smarter than us.
Right. So she basically inherits everything. She inherits the red flag fleet, she inherits the white flag fleet. She basically just says after he dies, like, all this is mine now, and I'm in charge of everything. And everyone was like, "Oh, I guess so." And anybody that didn't say that ended up getting killed.
See, in my mind, right? In my mind's eye, the way I see that happening is like the guy's looking the other way. She runs him through with the sword. And then she's like, "Hey, did you guys see him fall off the mast when the wind was blowing?"
Yeah.
And some of the guys are like, "No, that didn't happen. You just," and then she cuts their heads off. And then,
Hmm.
yeah. And then everybody
Yeah.
seems to agree.
And she did
That's
seem
how
to
it is
have a
in my
thing
mind's
with
eye.
cutting people's heads off. Like
That is
I
the
don't know if that's a
recurring
skill that you have to practice or if that's just something that some people are born being able to do, you know?
right. So no, yeah, that's her definitely, something that happened. So that's in 1807 that her husband fell and died. She appeared on the deck with her 21-year-old. Now, see, that's the thing. Like one version I read is her 21-year-old adopted son, who now becomes her lover and
Hmm.
declares herself the supreme commander. Now, I read another version that when they adopted him, like 3 years older earlier, he was like 6 years old. So I don't know.
Hmm.
You got to kind of, like I said, it's loosely based on history,
Right,
but
right.
she
And there's
basically
very, very little we actually know because turns
has
out,
hard fact. Yeah,
yeah, turns out when you get your ass kicked and you hire historians, you don't usually have them write histories about you getting your ass kicked. So China has very little actual history. Most of the history I have is from Portuguese and English um, historians.
right. No,
So,
that's yeah,
so in 1809, she orders a massive raid. Um, her lover Jing Pao is sent the Pearl River with Captain Zhao Pei Dai, I think how you pronounce his name. And they basically just went on a rampage up this river. They just went to every town, every port, burned everything down, took everything that they wanted, killed everybody. Ultimately, they said there's over 10,000 people killed over this 6 weeks period where they just went on a rampage and took everything. Ships, people, they took three or 400 slaves. And then Ching Yi Sao took command of 500 ships and followed him up and raided a town of Shangti and took 400 more slaves. And they basically were just doing whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted to do it, and taking whatever they wanted, and nobody could do anything about it.
that basically sounds right. Now, I also dug up her adopted son tried to turn on her 1 year later in 1810. Did you catch that?
No, I didn't see that.
All right. So in 1810, her adopted son and second in command, Jing Pao, secretly negotiated with it's Qing. Are we saying it King?
Quing.
Behind
Quing.
her, Quing, behind her
Hmm.
back. And she had him. So she found out about it. She has him stripped, flogged, 200 lashes in front of the fleet. Probably not a good time.
No,
And
I feel like 200 lashes is that
it
kills
sounds like
most
dead,
people.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And she only spares his life because, they're in love. So
Right.
love, right?
Hmm.
Again, you keep the woman happy is what I'm telling you.
Right.
See,
Right.
that's
Happy
really
wife,
the
happy
lesson,
life.
the,
You
the
don't get
takeaway. Yeah, right.
flogged.
Now, the officers who helped him were not so lucky, though. She again off with the heads for all of them.
Hmm.
Um, but that's one of the things. I was kind of priding her on the her her sense of rules and authority and diplomacy. Honestly, I mean, I know you're like, well, she's a pirate. There's not really diplomacy, but she had strict rules and ways of doing things. So one of the cool things that she did is all the rules that they had to follow were written out. So one, it makes it permanent. Um, they had the rules all listed on each of the ships. And so there would be set like it's funny because it was more like a list of consequences to bad behavior. So
Hmm.
instant death if you rape or have sexual relations without permission. So, hey, right there, no non-consensual sex with a female captive, you're still killed. The whole thing, she wasn't going for it.
Mm-hmm.
Desertion. Desertion got you a slow public death. Anyone who left their ship without leave had their ears cut off for the first offense because, second offense, they're nailed to the deck by their feet and flogged nearly to death, then left for 3 days in the sun before being beheaded because, you got to make sure they know that you were serious.
Yeah,
Because if
yeah.
you
I
just
feel
cut
like
their head
the
off, do
ears.
they really
I feel like
suffer?
the ears getting cut off means you're serious right off the bat. Like I feel like
That's
after that, who's really like, I'm gonna try my luck again and see what happens.
now what happens if so you raid a village and then you decide, hey, I'm going to steal from that guy because look, he's got the fancy pocket watch or maybe the
Mm-hmm.
little brooch you want for your wife, whatever. That's a no-go also. When they raided coastal villages, all loot went into a communal pile or a communal pool, and any pirate caught having or hiding a single copper coin or a chicken had his left hand or foot chopped off. So that's like a recurring theme in history, right? Cutting off the repeat
Cutting off parts.
offenders. You know what happens to repeat offenders, Kevin? It's back to the beheading.
Back to the head.
The
Head's
head's
coming off.
coming off. I mean, that's like the ultimate. What's going to happen is your head's coming off if you screw around. They have something she called the 2 cuts and a twist. Now, this is a real treat, and this is for disobeying orders in battle. This is how you inspire your guys to really, go out and fight for you. Some people are like, oh, freedom, America, we got eagles flying, and we're listening to Kid Rock, and we're like, yeah, we're going to go do a good job. She went another way, and it was called the 2 cuts and a twist. I'm sure there was a cooler, Cantonese name for it, but basically, the pirates who failed to attack when ordered received 2 deep slashes across their calves. Then their Achilles tendons were sliced and twisted so they could never run again. They were then dumped ashore so they could beg and starve.
Yeah, just be a
vagrant.
indigent. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Execution of 100 captives in a single day. 1808, after one of her squadrons was ambushed by Qing forces and lost several ships. I'm saying maybe because her husband ratted her out. I don't know. I'm inferring. She ordered every Qing prisoner from the next captured junk, that's a ship, over 100 men beheaded on the beach in full view of the imperial fort. Their heads were stacked into a pyramid because, you got to set the standard so people realize, right?
Yeah.
All right. We talked about her son. Some of the other brutalities. I guess that's kind of where what I dug up on, like why we think she was so ruthless and brutal. Now there is like a final like climax that comes out. What else do you have though? Yeah.
Yeah, no. So in about 1910, the Chinese government was like, all right, this is like, we can't do anything. We got to do something about this. We have a lot of money. We don't have a great navy. So they hired the Portuguese fleet to take her out. So they go looking for them. They're kind of looking for each other at this point, and they can't find anybody. They can't find each other. So Ching Yi Sao goes into a harbor. I'm sorry. So the first thing they do is she captures the brig of Antonio Beltalo, who's the Portuguese government of Timor. So they basically just, he was out on his ship, and they basically just grabbed it and be like, "Oh, we got your governor. What are you gonna do about it?" And so they come after. They're looking for each other, and the the Red Fleet go into the Tung Chung Bay, and they're just doing repairs on their ship and getting supplies, and then the Portuguese fleet shows up and they have them blocked in. Now basically what this bay is a two narrow channels around an island. There's the mainland and then two narrow channels around this island. So the Portuguese fleet block off both channels, and neither one wants to like go in and attack one another because it's because they're all heavily armed. So they just kind of want to block them in there and keep. And
Right.
the red flag fleet attacks twice, but both times the wind isn't right, and they end up having to fall back. So getting tired of waiting, the Portuguese send in fire ships. 40 ships, they're on fire, like, running right towards their ships. But they act quick. They pull all the ships off to the side, put the fires out, and then apparently just use the ships as firewood, and are able to turn two of the ships back around, two of the fire ships back around, and send them back towards the Portuguese.
That's like when they throw the grenade at you and you pick it up quick, and
that was basically what happened. Yeah. So they end up with those following those fire ships. They end up bringing out of the blockade. They ultimately, the red flag fleet loses 40 men and no ships, and the Portuguese lose 74 people. So they outclassed. They still fought their way out and ultimately inflicted more damages than they got.
And so that's the thing, is it ends up as like a touch and go, battle after battle. And it's actually the Portuguese, and there was another Navy, I think it was some British ships together. Like they were working together to try and round her up. And they really were hit or miss, it kind of was an even battle is what over and over, like in this end as it plays out. And the reason they were getting so desperate is basically the red flag fleet would surround all these harbors, and they would charge a tax for any goods going in and out. And it was just making trade hard for these outsiders, basically. And she was getting rich off it. But finally, everybody's getting tired of just constant battle, and it's just expensive. We're not out, plundering like we like to, and things aren't exactly going our way. And she decides, you know what? Ching Shih is like, I think it's time. Let's kind of put this to an end. So instead of let's get brutal and just go out in a blaze of glory and go kill each other, she does what she does best, and that's negotiate. And Kevin, thoughts? So she had guys who were already captured or surrendered. I guess nobody got captured because they were in fear of death, but they seemed to, some guys surrendered.
Yeah,
which I don't see
yeah,
how
they
that
started
happened.
China started running this policy of like, if you turn yourself in as a pirate, like all sins are forgiven, just stop being a pirate. You know what I mean? Like they were kind of desperate at this point where like, it used to be death. You get death for being a pirate.
You get caught as a pirate, forget it. It's
but eventually
over.
They realize they're just outgunned and there's nothing they can do about it. So they start a policy where like, if you turn yourself in and stop being a pirate, all sins are forgiven, keep your money and just retire being rich somewhere.
And who wouldn't want to be rich, Kevin? I know that's what I'm looking for.
I mean, it happens today. A lot of rich people, a lot of people make a lot of money embezzling, stealing, and then they're like,
kind of like a modern day pirate.
Stop doing it.
I hate to give them the coolness factor because these guys are just weaselly little snakes who steal from old ladies. But
right.
I'm talking about Enron, if you were wondering. But or Bernie Madoff, maybe.
Right.
They think they're like the shark of Wall Street, but really they're just kind of
They're
The
not
snake of
chopping
Wall
anyone's
Street.
heads off.
No,
They're not
no.
nailing people's feet to the ground.
If you're not putting skin in the game, you're not really a pirate hero, Kevin.
That's right.
That's basically what it comes down to. So she's like, hey, let's negotiate. Let's talk. But again, remember, she went from having nothing and working in a brothel to negotiating with a pirate to take half the control of his entire fleet and taking over everything. So this woman clearly knows how to negotiate. And so here's basically the terms she lays out. She says, first of all, my 17,800 guys who've surrendered, they all get full pardons, right? We're right away. These guys get a pass, and that's how it's going to play out. And you know what? All the things I've stolen and all the money I have and all the plunder, I'm just going to keep that.
Yeah.
That's just going to be mine. That's not even on the table. Uh, then they're like, "Oh, you know what? And my son, my husband, let's just put him in charge of your navy. That'd work out good. We'll make him a lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not
Yeah.
in
Oh,
charge,
so
but we'll make
you
him
have
an
a
officer."
navy and you can't defeat the pirates? What if we were the navy for you?
There you go. We got that, right? So
Mhm.
she is like, you know what? I think I'm gonna retire in Canton. Um, and I'm gonna open a casino, brothel, that kind of thing, and see how that goes. She gets the full amnesty. Um, they say her personal share was valued at roughly 30 million taels of silver. I don't really know what
Yeah.
that is. It says
Which is,
modern
yeah.
equivalent of, yeah, hundreds of millions to a billion. I guess now that silver is $50 an ounce, it's probably closer to the billion end. She kept every
Yeah.
coin, every ship she wanted, and full immunity. Uh, and it says her personal details turn her from a distant historical figure into like a real calculating, ferocious woman who, I mean, the bottom line is she's a badass. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's no
Yeah.
way around it, really.
And she got away with it, ended up being super rich and retiring, and she lived to like 70 years old. She just, stayed rich and kept doing her crazy shit and retired at a nice old age. And she wasn't even old when she retired, you know?
Right.
She was only
Yeah.
35.
Right. They said the dates I have, again, like I said, a lot of this is a little bit of speculation. I had a date here somewhere. Hang on.
Yeah.
She retired she was 69 when she died at 1844.
Okay.
So I think the key takeaway from all this story, though, is you got to be like Billy the Kid and have somebody write your memoirs and write a
Mm-hmm.
biography.
Yeah.
If you're a badass and you want people to know it, you got to put out some pamphlets and spread that shit around. Draw some
You got to
good pictures on
let
there.
everybody know.
You got to let people know. You can't just be a badass and expect everybody to, remember you throughout history. It takes somebody like me and Kevin digging it up. Half people never even heard. You search Pirate Queen, a lot of times you find out about some Irish girls. And I'll tell you, this is where it's at. This is the queen right here because it's
Mm-hmm.
just you need that story. You got to really capture it and put it in a book. I mean, I endlessly go out on YouTube and Spotify and blab any story I can tell you, Hey, I was working on my car. I'm really awesome. You got to do that. You got to build yourself up
Right.
if you want a real legacy. I'm just saying, putting that out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that ultimately she is one of the most badass pirates of all time. Men or women.
I Yeah, all day. That's actually how we framed it is yeah. She is definitely, there's no Blackbeard and no, none of this when you're talking about commanding an army, a navy. You have a navy that rivals
Right.
governments
It's
at
not
the
a
time.
captain, you're a commodore at that point.
There you go. I like it. I'm picking up what you're putting down. So, no, exactly. That's it. So, anyway, We appreciate it. You have some insight. You want to tell us about how Kevin doesn't speak proper Cantonese like you thought he did. I'm just saying, you might want to put it in the comments. Maybe send us an email at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Otherwise, I would say stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.